I'm Anthony Wright, and I am your co-host today on the Living Conversation with,
Adam Dietz, welcome to the conversation.
and we're talking with our guest Bob Martin. And Bob, before the break, you were talking about the evolution of humankind, of so many generations, and how we had craved fat, salt, and sugar, and uh, really made a turn in our evolution from the hunter-gatherer to agriculture. So please continue from there.
Yeah. So if we had developed what was beneficial and helpful to us in the jungle, where we had a lot of really hard physical labor during the day and not much fat and sugar, we turn to a life now where we're sedentary and you get
Mhm.
more fat and sugar in a McDonald's Happy Meal than you would have in the jungle. In order to keep our bodies healthy, we all know we got to go to the gym and work out. You can imagine how the hunter-gatherer guy from, 2 million years ago would look at you and say, "Why are you lifting weights? Don't you get enough work during the day? What are you doing that for? That's got to be nuts." So no wonder we have an obesity epidemic. So we can understand that when it comes to our body. Somehow we think our mind is free from that evolutionary mistake.
Mhm.
It's not. And so we constantly scan for danger. And we had developed a way of dealing with danger because danger was always acute. We didn't carry over obligations. We didn't have deadlines. We didn't have 3-week assignments. We had daily stuff that had to be dealt with and had to be dealt with now and then. So all of the danger was acute. And our whole mechanism for stress is designed to have the adrenaline, the cortisol pumps into our body from the stress, blood pressure goes up, white corpuscles flood our body so that we can, cure a wound. If we lose blood, we still have blood going to our brain, blood pressure goes up.
Mhm.
All of these things happen to us. Now, we don't live in a life mostly of acute danger anymore. We live a life in chronic, undifferentiated stress. Stress and danger are synonymous. The body's response to danger is stress, but we perceive our danger now as missing the deadline, not getting an A, staying out too late, running out of gas, not paying the next bill. These are all the dangers that are being presented, and they're undifferentiated and they're constant. So rather than having a stress response and either running or fleeing or fighting and burning off that stress, we're constantly being stimulated with little stressors, and our mind is always scanning, looking for what it is that makes me feel like I'm in danger, but we can't identify it because it's 100 little things. And
Well,
so
in the case of Minnesota, I'm from Minnesota, and they've been
now that's
really
acute.
dealing with some really difficult things there, and I'm really proud to say I'm from Minnesota in the
And
current
I'm proud of
circumstance.
you. Yeah, well, that's acute. And so, of course, there is that. But for the rest of the country, hearing day after day after day this
Right.
patter of things and tariffs and this and that, this is a constant barrage of small dangers that keeps us at an elevated level of stress. It is evolutionary and it is protective, and there's nothing we can do to stop that. And science has proven that we cannot lower our stress levels intentionally. We cannot. And you can see what the stress level is by taking a picture of the brain. And if your right hemisphere has more electrical activity, you're going to feel stressed, negative, pessimistic, hopeless, all those things.
So, Bob, how do you deal with that? How do people deal with that?
Here is what people don't get, and this is the biggest thing I can share. It's not about turning the stress down, it's about turning the antidotes up, increasing the electrical activity on the left side of the brain.
Hmm.
Go out and watch a sunset. Go to a playground and watch the kids playing. Color. Do things that raise your sense of well being. feel awe, expose yourself to awe, do those things that are all about well-being. Go walk in a forest, take the
Yeah, I was going to
time
say,
to sit, meditate, jog, walk, do those things where you are taking care of yourself in a joyful way. In Buddhism, they've got a very simple formula. The three stressors are wanting, I want something I don't have, not wanting, not liking, hate, greed, hate, but or in their lesser forms, and then ignorance. And so those are the three great stressors, the roots. They call them the three poisonous roots.
yeah,
I have a little story about that, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
A very prominent politician came on a very prominent social media site and said that college professors are the enemy. And at that time, we were still professors before they shut down the philosophy department at our university.
Mm,
And I said, yes, yes, I am the enemy of greed, hate, and delusion.
there you go.
And
ignorance. Yeah,
maybe that politician got the last laugh because maybe he had a hand in getting rid of our department. Who knows?
Who knows? But
But yeah, I think that I love to hear you describe it in that way. That whenever we are feeling full and we're living in a space that is enriching and nurturing and cultivating, then those three enemies are very small and maybe even just not around at all.
yeah.
And vice versa, right?
Right, right, right. Well, the antidote to greed or wanting is to actually cultivate generosity
Mm.
and a kind of equanimity, a kind of like love of all creation, love of the earth, if you want to say, love of God, if you're religious. But to cultivate those qualities, if I love you, Adam, I don't want to take your your portion. I'll be happy with my portion. And I'm happy to share with you. So that takes away greed, that generosity and love of creation. As far as hatred, compassion, if we cultivate
right.
compassion, we it's the antidote to hatred, and then of course wisdom, learning for the sake of learning, is what mitigates against ignorance
So
and delusion.
all three of these, the way I used to try and teach it is that all three of these remind that when you see things at their highest level, you feel a sense of real companionship, camaraderie with them. You see the oneness in all things. And
Hmm.
if you see the oneness in all things, of course you'll be reverential towards them. And this is having in Confucian, this is some of the steps that then you have a correct mind,
Hmm.
then you can act appropriately in your relationships.
Hmm.
That's really interesting to hear you describe it that way and very, very helpful. Thank you.
No,
One
it
of the
is.
things,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry,
one of the
Anthony.
things that I do want to get into before we're done, and we've got just a few minutes before the next break, but you have made a very interesting melding of Abrahamic or Abrahamic religion and
Hmm.
Taoism, in
Hmm.
that you have
Very
written a book
close.
where you take the 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching
Hmm.
and bring in um, Abrahamic or Christian
Hmm.
verses to those.
Hmm.
Talk to us about what that process was like, and how did you come to that? I mean, and
So,
there's the background of Matteo Ricci, who was the Jesuit monk who went to China, but
mhm.
continue, please.
Well, I, two little pieces, and then it's probably time for the break. But I'll tell you the real story on the other side. But
Sure.
two pieces are my father and my mother were non-religious. My father was a Hungarian royalty refugee
Oh,
from the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 and World War One. And the Bolsheviks and wiped out his entire family. My mom was Roma Gypsy. Everybody wiped out her family.
oh
So I
boy.
literally have no ancestors. And they came to the conclusion that there could not be a loving God. And so they just never practiced any religion. I grew up with no religion. But my father said, we are Americans and you need to know the Bible story. So you are going to go to children's Bible school. And he would take me on Sundays to churches where I would go in and listen to Noah's Ark and the Garden of Eden. And for me, it was all like Disney. I had never been introduced to any kind of supernatural creatures, so for me, it was all
Mhm.
interesting. But they kept telling me there is this guy, and he loves you. And he's up there somewhere, or
I
he's
know
over
a
there
guy.
somewhere. I know a guy. I got a guy. He loves you. And they all said the same thing. So I did become convinced that there was somebody in the universe that loved me. So that is a piece of the story that was always residing there. Um, and then of course came my experience with knee, and I didn't have to believe in any kind of God or any kind of angels or cherubs with that. And so I started to develop the wisdom of that.
Mm.
So those kind of two things resided in me. Um, and then I went through life and I met my current wife. And here comes the
Oh.
story, if we have time.
Well, just a couple minutes, and then we can pick it up on the other side. And I just wanted to say about, in a manner of speaking, uh, Asian religions are a little less personal, but Abrahamic religions are quite personal.
Yes. You
And
mean in terms of personal, in terms of a person's relationship with God?
yes,
Uh-huh.
yep.
Yeah. Oh, no, very much so. I mean, it's all about the relationship.
So you came to this through your relationship with your wife.
Who
Uh,
was a Southern Baptist
oh,
Bible literalist.
and in terms of a literalist, you're talking about
That she
uh,
believes in the Bible literally.
inerrancy. That
No,
there,
well, I don't know about inerrancy. I don't think she's ever thought about that too deeply, but she believes in the Garden of Eden. She believes in Noah's Ark. She believes in all the Bible stories. She believes all the history of the Bible is factual.
okay, all right.
Um,
So we're
she
coming
had
up.
she had an interesting revelation when I brought her to the Museum of Natural History in New York down to see Lucy and
Oh,
the
that
mural of evolution. She had a little. That was an interesting moment. And then when she had to deal with the gay question,
right, right,
was a big moment for her.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up on a break. I'm
Okay.
Anthony Wright. I am your co-host on the Living Conversation with,
Adam Dietz, welcome. And thanks for
and
joining.
we're talking with our guest Bob Martin. And how can people contact you, Bob?
At my email, I am Bob Martin at gmail.com, or through my website, awiseandhappylife.com.
Great. We'll take a short break and be right back. So stay tuned. And I am Anthony Wright, your co-host today on the Living Conversation with,
Adam Dietz, welcome.
and we're talking with our guest Bob Martin. And Bob, before the break, I was very interested in your work about making correlations between Taoism and Abrahamic religion in terms of bringing Christian verses to Taoist and verses in the Tao Te Ching. And you were speaking about your wife, who was a devout Southern Baptist. So please
Mm-hmm.
continue with that story.
Well, being having grown up in the South and being in the Baptist vein, which is mostly a literalist, I'm not going to say evangelical.
Mm,
I think that word has a lot of baggage these days, but she believed in the Bible's stories and the history of the Bible as factual, and the like. And she thought that my stuff was just plain weird, and I just couldn't buy her science. The world being 4,000 years old and those kinds of things. Um, so a lot of people say, what brought you guys together? And I will tell you that my wife is, in Buddhist terms, a bodhisattva.
oh yeah.
She is a saint. I just let me define bodhisattva for a moment. A bodhisattva is somebody that is so kind, of such complete generosity that they choose not to go to heaven so that they can help other people get there. That kind of immense generosity. That's who she is. And she sees somebody that's in need of help, she will move into it. And if somebody applauds her for it, she is curious as to why they would applaud her for it. Obviously, it needed to be done. That's just who she is. And so we met on our values, but our cosmologies were so different. So one day, she came home and she was kind of telling me about what the pastor said, and it really had moved her. And I was thinking, that's the same thing as, chapter 5 of the Tao Te Ching, which is the seminal book of
Oh.
Buddhism.
Mhm.
So I went and read chapter 5 again, and I said, yeah, this is it. I think it had to do with Jesus's having returned and talked to the disciples, and then he arose to heaven. And I was thinking that Lao Tzu said that if you are called upon to be a leader, do your work and then step down.
Mm, mm, mm.
And Jesus did his work, and then he
Went
returned. He
away.
left. He left,
Yep.
and thus his work has become eternal, as it says. And I said, "Oh, it's." So I started thinking, "Wow, there's so many things." So thank you, Google. I would read. I would read something in the Tao Te Ching, and I would say, "Okay, what does the Bible say about humility?" And then I
Ah.
would get all of these quotes out of the Bible, and I say, "Well, that is the same one as that." And so then I just started thinking, let me take a couple of these chapters and see if I can reimagine them in Christian terminology. And it's really hard to go from a God oriented system to a non God oriented system. And I don't think I could have done it if I didn't have a deep understanding of Taoism, because even though the Tao may say this, it's not a literal thing, it's not a literal translation. It's I get what Lao Tzu was saying, and there are other things in Taoist terminology that really fit better. And so I kind of weaved in some Taoism with keeping the idea basically the same, and wrote something that was as pithy and in the same format and at the same pace as the Tao Te Ching, which is almost poetic.
Mm, mm.
And I showed it to her, and she goes, "Oh, this isn't weird. There's nothing weird about this. There's nothing weird about this.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Great,
Oh, now
great.
you see." She goes, "Oh, now you're getting it." She
Oh,
said,
okay.
"Now
Yeah,
you're getting it."
yeah.
So I did another, and I did another, and I did another. Finally, I wound up doing all 81. And as she would say, God had a plan. She would say,
Hmm.
because I was at school and a textbook salesperson had a conversation. Somehow we started talking about my writing, and she goes, "We have a niche publisher that would love this." And she gave me a referral, and they took a look at it, and they said, "Yeah, we want to publish this."
Oh,
And
that's
now
fantastic.
what's really exciting is I just got an offer from Commercial Publishers Hong Kong
Mm.
that
Oh.
they want to buy the rights from me to translate it into Chinese and distribute it. And their first printing will be 30,000 copies,
Wow, great.
and distributed in Chinese.
Congratulations.
So I am
Yeah.
so excited about that.
That's
Thank you
great.
so
Yeah,
much.
yeah.
Mhm.
You know, earlier in our one of the sections earlier in the interview, you were talking about a flow state.
Mhm.
And in a way, I there was an evangelical acquaintance of mine who came to me and said, "Anthony, you're so spiritual. How can you be so spiritual and not be Christian?" And I said, "Well, I study Buddhism and Taoism." And he talked to me. He said, "Well, tell me about Buddhism." And I thought about the Diamond Sutra.
Mhm.
And in the Diamond Sutra, Subhuti, Buddha's disciple, said, "Oh, Lord Buddha, your merit is greater than all the numerous grains of sand in the Ganges." And Buddha said, "Just so, Subhuti, but that's only a way of talking about it." So I came back to him and I said I had a mind worm for him. And the mind worm was, if you can think of it, it's already too small because when we think of something, we constrict
Hmm.
reality into words.
Hmm.
So, in also in I think it's Chuang-Tzu, and maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, where Confucius is talking with somebody who wants to go to a next state, and because there's a tyrant in the next state, and he talks about forgetting the self.
Hmm.
And um, this to me comes back to having a flow state, and I agree with you that I think we go into flow states every day, but we don't accredit them that way because when you're doing something in a flow state, there's no longer any you that's separate.
That's
And
correct.
that's one of the tenets of Buddhism. There's no separated Anthony
Correct.
or Adam
Correct.
uh, or you. And so it's this idea. And my acquaintance came back to me and he said he got to know God better because he quit trying to put God into a thought box.
Fucks. Right.
And so I would imagine because of your wife and how devout she is, she hangs out outside of that thought box. Is that right?
I would say that she has again, yes and yes. Yes and yes. There's a piece of her that God is responsible for everything and it's all
Right.
a God plan and he micromanages our lives and the like. But if you ask her, how do you perceive God? She's bumfuzzled.
Mm.
Right.
So there she's outside the box, you know, but in her practical application of the concept of God, she's very much in a box. But in her actual idea of what God is, she has no words.
But you've seen her in a flow state, I would
Yes,
imagine.
yes,
Okay.
yes,
So that's to me this idea of she forgets herself and is doing in that language, she's doing God's work.
yes, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely, and I think that when we talk about flow, if I may,
Please.
um, there's kind of two uses of the word. There's the flow state, which that guy whose name you could never pronounce,
Hi. Hi, chick sent me high.
Jim, yeah, that guy with
Yeah.
CHEMIQ. But
Yeah.
but he came up with this idea of the flow state, which is when you are engaged enough so that you have more challenge than bored, but less challenged than overwhelmed. You are in this state where time seems to pass. And when I'm writing, oh, how did it get dark?
Right.
It was just noon. How did it get dark? And then there's also the kind of flow that I'm talking about, which is the flow of energy through the world. That the river of consciousness that flows through the world, and that's like a more physical idea of flow, that like the flow of energy from the positive to the negative pole of a battery. And so when I talk about going with the flow, it's going with that stream. But when you go with that stream, you do enter the flow state. Um,
And I would imagine that that is the very thing you are working with your students about. Is that correct?
yes, of course it doesn't happen overnight. You
No,
know
no.
that it doesn't, but everybody has it and
We're very
experiences it.
habituated.
Yeah. The flow state is that when the basketball player says, "How did you hit all those 3 pointers?" Because I don't know. It didn't even feel like it was me.
I
Yeah,
was in
Steph
the
Curry.
zone.
Yeah,
In the zone. In the zone is the flow state.
But
But there's something I do want to I think is important to talk about. First of all, the whole Buddhist Christian thing. You got Thomas Merton.
yep.
You have so many writers, and I can't remember the name who wrote the book, but learning Buddhism made me a better Christian.
Mm.
I was going to make
Is
the same
a
point.
is
I was
a
going to make the same point.
terrific
Yeah.
is and so many. I mean, the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, they've all said, if you're going to be a Christian, be a good Christian. If you're going to be a good Buddhist, be a good Buddhist. You don't, and like. But here's where I think that the division cutting through the division could be more helpful. Because I think my little personal theory is that what the what the West has Jesus. And Jesus looked at in the appropriate way, the way that Jesus is described, and the way that much of Christianity looks at him. There are segments of Christianity that feel somehow he represent. They look at the turning over the tables as the definition of Jesus, and
Yep.
so it gives us the right to go to war.
Mm.
But much of Christianity, thinks of Jesus as unconditional love. Now, here is a model of unconditional love. God so loved the world that he gave, you know? So there's this model of unconditional love. In the East, and let me also say, the only thing is that they killed him. And they killed him after he only taught for 3 years. Now, I understand that the killing and the resurrection is the proof of his divinity and it's so important to the establishment. I get that. But what if he had lived for 40 years? Could you imagine what he would have taught? He was a great wisdom teacher of all time. It would have been amazing. Now, over in the East, you have wisdom teachers, and they did teach for years and years, and they developed programs and techniques and ways of teaching and teaching methodologies, and as we say at the university, pedagogies
Yep.
of teaching, and so they don't really have that model of unconditional love, but that's where they want you to get to. And so, if you can meld the East and the West together and look at the practices of the East as leading to a state of unconditional love, and you now have a model of what that looks like, it all could be very, very powerful together. And that was one of the reasons for writing the book as well, trying to bring those two things together so that they would be helpful. It's almost as in the West, we say, oh, you just accept Jesus in your heart. But since he really didn't give us a whole lot of teachings, we just have to depend on the fact that somehow from being inside your heart, he's going to teach you how to live.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you make a point about having this togetherness, and I think there's a model for that in Hinduism and in some Eastern religions where Hinduism they say, yeah, Buddha is a Hindu. Jesus is
Hmm.
another manifestation of the god Krishna coming to earth.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yes.
and you described earlier that your Buddhist practice was Mahayana, and
Hmm.
Mahayana we know means great raft, so that anything that helps us we can use, right?
Hmm. Right.
Including if we need to listen to the teachings of Jesus, if that helps us, then we
Uh-huh.
can use the teachings of Jesus.
Yeah. Of course, my
Well,
favorite Gandhi quote is, I love your Jesus. The followers, I'm not so sure about.
well, I'm sorry to say that we are out of time.
So
Oh, God.
sorry.
Yeah, this has been really great fun. And I'm Anthony Wright, and I've been your co-host today on the Living Conversation with,
Adam Dietz, thanks for joining the conversation.
and we've been talking with our guest, Bob Martin. And how can people contact you, Bob?
I have to say thank you, and it is such an honor to meet you too. Thank you so
Thank,
much
Oh,
for having me on.
thank you,
you're
Bob.
very
I hope
welcome.
we can do this again.
Yeah. And how can people contact you?
I am Bob Martin, one word, at gmail.com or through my website, awiseandhappylife.com.
Great. Well, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.